the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, a globally recognized wildlife charity, has adopted a controversial policy supporting the limited exploitation of certain endangered species for economic gain, a strategy encompassing practices like trophy hunting. This approach, however, has generated considerable debate, particularly regarding the WWF's simultaneous involvement in promoting the trade of polar bear fur while concurrently use. The polar bear, significantly impacted by the diminishing Arctic sea ice, faces mounting challenges. The reduction in sea ice hinders their ability to hunt, forcing them to expend greater energy to secure prey. Consequently, in several regions, polar bears are exhibiting signs of deteriorating physical health, reduced cub production, and decreased lifespans. Despite their endangered status, commercial hunting of polar bears continues in Canada, the sole nation permitting this practice following its prohibition by Russia, Greenland, the United States, and Norway. An average of 300 to 400 polar bear skins are exported annually, primarily to China, where a single pelt commands an average price of $60,000, 48,000 pounds, and is frequently used in luxury apparel or as rugs. With an estimated Canadian polar bear population ranging from 22,000 to 31,000, this trade accounts for the annual mortality of 1 to 2% of the nation's polar bear population. A 2-year investigation unearthed evidence of WWF's involvement in facilitating the international commercial trade in polar bear furs, aligning with their broader policy of sustainable utilization. This policy posits that licensing the exploitation of a limited number of animals for economic purposes, such as fur or trophy hunting, can ultimately enhance the overall status of the species. While WWF has publicly articulated its stance on trophy hunting and the ivory trade, stating it is not opposed to hunting programs that present no threat to the survival of threatened species and, where such species are involved, are part of a demonstrated conservation and management strategy that is scientifically based, properly managed, and strictly enforced, with revenues and benefits going back into conservation and local communities. At the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, the global regulator of endangered species trade, WWF has consistently advocated for the continuation of the Canadian commercial polar bear fur trade. Their position statement acknowledges the potential for a significant decline in the polar bear population in the coming decades, but asserts that the trade is not a significant threat to the species, though there are a number of polar bear populations in Canada where harvest may be unsustainable. In 2010, and subsequently at CITES meetings where the U.S., supported by Russia, proposed a ban on the international commercial trade of polar bear skins, WWF actively lobbied against granting polar bears full protection. They argued that polar bears hadn't yet met the criteria for a complete ban, a stance they maintain to this day. At the 2022 CITES meeting in Panama, when questioned about recommending enhanced protection in the next decade, Coleman O'Criadane, WWF International's policy manager for wildlife and advisor to WWF's Arctic program, stated he did not think so in terms of the numeric criteria. A 2013 WWF statement further clarified their position. If, at some stage in the future, polar bear populations become so diminished by climate change and habitat loss, or if international trade presents a greater threat, we would want to revisit the CITES listing issue, but we're not at that point. WWF also contends that a ban on the international commercial trade would negatively impact the livelihoods of Indigenous. Robert Thompson, an Inupiat resident and polar bear guide from Kaktovik, Alaska, stated, "We didn't sell these animals for 10,000 years, and that's why they are still here. We didn't have a commercial need." Both CITES proposals failed to secure the necessary 2/3 majority for a trade ban. WWF's lobbying efforts against full CITES protection extend beyond polar bears, encompassing elephants, hippos, giraffes, and rhinos. The 2022 CITES meeting witnessed WWF's successful lobbying to reclassify Namibia's white rhino population from Appendix I, full protection, to the less restrictive Appendix Roman II. This position contrasts sharply with the majority of wildlife protection organizations, with a coalition of approximately 80 NGOs opposing WWF's recommendations at the past 4 CITES meetings. WWF maintains that an Appendix I listing for polar bears wouldn't have prevented trophy hunting, arguing that under Appendix Roman II, commercial trade, in skins for example, is also allowed, and the Inuit in Canada avail of this. For this reason, on both occasions when the Appendix I listing was proposed, Inuit representatives spoke passionately against it. Rejection of the proposal was also recommended by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the NGO Traffic, the Pew Environment Group, and the CITES Secretariat. The inherent complexities of balancing conservation efforts with the economic realities faced by Indigenous communities, coupled with the inherent challenges of regulating international wildlife trade, continue to fuel the ongoing debate surrounding WWF's policies and the effectiveness and ethical implications of their sustainable utilization approach remain a subject of intense scrutiny and ongoing discussion within the conservation community. The long-term consequences of these policies on the survival of endangered species, like the polar bear, remain to be seen, highlighting the multifaceted and often controversial nature of wildlife conservation in the 21st century.